it was a great experience working again with the University of Virginia's Center for Survey Research. We are going to hear from them this evening about sort of the high-level findings of that work. We will hear from Dr. Kara Fitzgibbon, who's the director of the Center for Survey Research. She'll walk you through the survey inquiry and its findings. And we want the points that Kara brings out this evening to help spur your thoughts as we move into the community room after her presentation and have a conversation that will kick off a year of planning for us for our next strategic plan cycle. So without any further ado, I give you Dr. Kara Fitzgibbon from the University of Virginia.
Good evening, everyone. It is a pleasure to be here, just as it was a pleasure for the Center for Survey Research to work with the Reston Community Center and its board over the last year developing and implementing the survey. And as Lila noted, tonight I'll be providing a high-level summary of the survey findings, but there is a written report that includes complete responses, a very detailed survey methodology, as well as several comparative analysis tables. So should you have a question that's not addressed tonight, there is the opportunity to look into that further with the written report that's posted on the RCC website. Now, while I'll be giving just the high-level summary findings, I do want to provide some context and background on the survey and how we did it. The survey had 5 general aims that were developed by the board. First, we wanted to assess the general awareness and support of the Reston Community Center throughout Reston. Additionally, we wanted to understand the current as well as projected use of RCC programs, identify the barriers that may exist that prevent community members from using RCC more, identify accessible sources of information on leisure time activities, and finally, to assess the level of interest and support in the community for Performing Arts Center. To achieve these aims, we designed a multi-mode mixed probability sample. I will try and speak as simply as I can about this methodology. So we had 2 avenues through which we collected responses. We have our probability sample, and this is a scientifically drawn sample of Reston households. We also had an open source community survey that was available on RCC's website. It was important to include both types of samples in order to achieve the survey's full potential. The probability sample, because of the scientific methods through which it was drawn, that provides the statistical basis for us to be able to generalize our survey results to the full Reston population. In line with RCC's mission of representing all community members, it was also important to have this open source survey available to any Reston community member to take and provide their feedback to ensure these results are not only representative from the scientific sample, but inclusive of all members. Through data collection, which was done over the summer of 2019, we received 1,089 completes from our probability sample, and an additional 817 completes from our open source non-probability sample. Now, as noted, the probability responses give us the statistical basis to generalize to the full population of Reston. So for tonight's presentation, the results presented will just be those of the probability responses. But again, in the full report, you can find the complete responses of both probability and non-probability respondents on all questions. So we should get on with it. To begin, we asked respondents if they had heard of RCC, and 94% of respondents had. We then asked a series of questions to gauge support and general opinion of RCC. 86% consider the Reston Community Center to be very important to the overall quality of life in Reston. 90% think RCC makes Reston a more attractive place to live, and 76% think Reston Community Center makes Reston a more desirable location for a business to locate. In addition to understanding the awareness and support of RCC, we also wanted to understand the general use of the programs. 54% of households have used RCC in the last 12 months. Now thinking just if households who have ever used RCC, that goes up to 75%. And on top of that, we have 76% of respondents who would like to participate in RCC more than they currently do. RCC was also interested in, through the survey, assessing use and interest in specific program types. Towards that end, we provided a list of 12 program types to respondents. And you can see on the board, those range from rental of RCC space, learn to swim classes, youth and teen programs, and so on. For each program type, we asked respondents to report if they currently or have ever used that program type. We asked them if they may be interested in using that program type had they not already used it. And then finally, if they never could see their household members using that program type. These are the results from that series of questions, and allow me to orient you in reading this graph. So in our leftmost bar, that's our navy, that's the percent of respondents who said their household have at some point in time used that program type. Our middle bar, the lighter blue, that represents the percentage of respondents who would potentially be interested in using that program type, though they hadn't yet. And then in our green on the far right, those are the percentages of respondents who said they never saw themselves likely to use that program. So in looking at the programs with the most current or past use, we have community events and professional touring artist series as the most widely used RCC programs. These questions can also point us in the direction of where is their potential participation. The land-based fitness and wellness programs, as well as the lifelong learning, both have very high proportions of the may be interested, that middle light blue column, relative to a lower rate of having actually participated. So these might be areas that RCC could further explore and meet the community's potential interest. As another means to assess specific program preferences, we asked respondents to list the existing program types that they consider most relevant to their household, and separately to list new programs that they would be interested in seeing that they don't know that RCC currently offers. Among the existing programs, there were the four most commonly cited program types, each with over 25% of respondents listing them. You may notice these are the same four programs that were identified in a separate series of questions as either the most widely used or the two programs with the most potential interest. And so we're seeing a consistent pattern here. We also asked respondents to list the programs they would be most interested in seeing that they don't yet. And these were all on open ends, and so CSR thematically coded those and came up with three groups that were coming up the most often. Those are age-specific programming, fitness and sports programming, and additional lifelong learning educational courses. With the age-specific programming in particular, there were references to more senior-specific programming, as well as a push for what I would describe as adults-only programming that's geared toward more middle-aged adults who felt that programming either leaned older or younger than their particular demographic. For the fitness and sports, individuals listed specific sports they'd like to see, but there was also a request for the existing fitness classes, like yoga, to be offered more frequently than it already is. And regarding the additional lifelong learning, there was a wide array of responses here, such as cooking classes, STEM classes, gardening, real estate, you name it. You all have a great variety of interests. Now, when it comes to RCC programming, it was important for the board both to understand current use and interest in programs, but also to understand the community's views on how RCC allocates its funding towards programming. So to that point, the following question was asked. When property tax values rise in our area, revenues raised from property taxes go up too. If more tax money was available to RCC due to new revenue, which of the following statements comes closest to your view? 1, increase the number, types of programs. Increase accessibility to programming by lowering prices, fees. Add features to programs and facilities. Or something else, and then not sure. For those that selected something else, they had a write-in option in case the existing options didn't match their sentiment. Here's what we found. A third of respondents would want RCC to increase accessibility to programming by lowering prices and fees. About another third would like to see RCC increase the number and types of programs. And about 1/4 would like RCC to add features to programs and facilities. Now, as noted, those that selected something else could write in an option. We then reviewed those responses and again thematically coded them to see if there were any repeated responses. And about 4% of respondents wrote in an answer that was along the lines of wanting to see the tax lowered or to see those additional funds returned to residents. And then a remaining 7% gave a variety of responses that weren't large enough to even group together, but they were consistent with wanting to see a combination of the first 3 responses, wanting to see RCC set the money aside that could go towards maintenance when needed, as well as some responses writing in that they'd like to see RCC build a new facility. Another aim of the survey was to better understand the barriers community members encounter that prevent participation at RCC. Now recall, in our first slide, that 3/4 of respondents reported wanting to attend RCC more than they do, so something's preventing people. So to better understand the circumstances preventing greater participation, we presented respondents with a series of possible barriers, and then asked the respondent to rate each of those barriers on a scale of 1 to 5. I've got another colorful graph for you, so let me guide you here. The red leftmost bar indicates the percentage who consider that given item to be a significant barrier. The rightmost light blue bar captures the percentage who consider the item to not at all be a barrier. We've organized this graph in decreasing order, so our items at the top of the graph are those that were rated a significant barrier by the largest number of people. We see being too busy is the most common barrier, with approximately 1/2 of respondents considering it either a 5 or 4 on our barrier scale. The second most commonly cited barrier is finding the current programming schedule to be inconvenient, followed by a lack of awareness of existing programs. I think while just about all of us can relate to the sense of being too busy, these barriers did vary by demographic groups. In particular, being too busy was reported at a higher rate by respondents with children, those who are employed, and/or respondents between the ages of 30 and 60 years old. In terms of viewing the program schedule as inconvenient, that was rated as a more significant barrier among respondents aged 30 to 64, those with less than a 4-year college degree, and those with annual household income less than $50,000. And finally, lack of awareness of existing programs was reported as a more significant barrier among respondents who have lived in Reston for less than 10 years, those who work full-time, and those who are between the ages of 30 and 39 or 50 to 65 years old. Another area of focus for the 2019 community survey was to achieve a better understanding of the use of media and preferred communication within the Reston community. Towards that end, respondents were asked the type of media they use on a regular basis, and they could select as many types as they found applicable. The most widely used media was online journalism, which was regularly used by over 60% of respondents. Broadcast television, radio, Facebook, and print journalism were all used by approximately half of respondents. We also asked specifically about sources of information that the respondent uses to find out about RCC programs and activities. Respondents could again select multiple sources, but as we can see, far and away, the RCC Seasonal Program Guide is highly used and effective means of communicating RCC-specific information. This is used by over 3/4 of respondents. We also asked respondents outside of RCC programming, how do they find out about leisure time activities more generally? Over half of respondents find out about these types of activities from friends and family and/or internet searches. That's then followed by local newspapers and social media. The final area of interest for the community survey was to assess the public's interest in a performing arts center and under what conditions the public would support RCC's involvement and the role in this endeavor. A variety of questions were asked on this topic. To begin, we asked the respondent how interested they would be in Reston having a larger venue in which to see music, dance, film screening, other performing arts. The answer choices range from very interested to not at all interested, as well as a choice for the respondent to express that they think RCC's current facilities are sufficient. This chart presents those findings. And as we see, 2/3 of respondents are somewhat to very interested in Reston having a larger performance venue. We then wanted to understand how the community felt about RCC's involvement and role in a performing arts center, depending on the funding source. Respondents were asked about the following scenario. If an arts venue is built by a developer, to what extent do you support RCC operating that venue on behalf of the community? Response options range from very supportive to not at all supportive. This chart reflects the substantive responses to that question. And we see that over 80% of respondents are somewhat to very supportive of RCC operating the venue if it's built by a developer. In a final scenario, we asked respondents without a developer contribution, RCC would need to undertake a bond referendum to obtain authority from the community to borrow funds in order to build a new facility. To what extent do you support RCC financing the building of a new arts venue by means of a bond issue? The response options were again ranging from very supportive to not at all supportive. Here we see more varied viewpoints under this scenario. While the majority of respondents are still somewhat to very supportive, nearly 1/3 of respondents are not at all supportive of this particular funding mechanism. So while there is general support across various scenarios, there are clearly varying perspectives on having a performing arts center and RCC's role and the funding mechanism for that center. So to summarize, there are high levels of awareness and support for RCC, and 76% of respondents would like to use RCC more than they currently do. Regarding program use, community events and the Professional Touring Artist Series are the most widely attended RCC offerings, and lifelong learning and land-based fitness and wellness programs are a source for potential of increased use by the community. Regarding barriers to use, being too busy, feeling that the program schedule is inconvenient, and a lack of awareness of existing programs are the most cited barriers among the community. And to that point, in terms of lack of awareness of existing programs, we can turn to what are the most accessible modes of communication to then reach community members. The RCC program guide is particularly effective, but then in addition, RCC should maintain and even expand their online presence to make sure they're capturing those individuals and spreading information that way. And when it comes to a new performing arts center, as we see, the Reston community holds a variety of passionate views on this topic. So while the survey findings suggest there is widespread support for this type of center, we have 68% who are somewhat to very interested in Reston having the larger venue, 82% somewhat to very supportive of RCC operating the venue if built by a developer, and 56% somewhat to very supportive of RCC financing the building through a bond referendum. There's a variety of opinions here still, and this is just a starting point. RCC already has many plans to continue to explore community feedback, including a series of focus groups with community members and stakeholders in the months to come over the next year as they develop their strategic plan. So please view this as a starting point and a basis for those conversations that will continue to develop and be unpacked. Thank you for your attention, and I look forward to your questions.